And a good morning, watch nerds. So forget anything Seiko or Citizen make and forget the Orient Komatsu. If you want a uniquely designed dive watch with great spec and finish, then just buy one of these. This isn't a watch that's been knocked up by the manufacturer to make money. This is a watch made on behalf of two watch nuts who wanted to produce something very special for not a lot of money. Unfortunately, they're no longer made, but they do come up on eBay from time to time. They originally cost about £240 from memory, but I'm not sure if duty had to be added to that. A good used one will cost you about £200, and believe me, you won't feel ripped off, even if it's not quite perfect. But there again, what is? For a watch that costs relatively little, I've got so much to say about it. Some good, and a few things not so good. Sorry to go on about it, but I believe this is probably the best value for money non-homage dive watch ever made. But if you can come up with a better one, please leave it in the comments below. For what it's worth, I believe the best value for money pound for pound dive watch ever produced is the Steel Dive 1970 Captain Willard. But that's a homage, and technically it falls well short of this one. Now J&G stands for James and Gary. Now Gary Williams has got two UK based successful YouTube watch review channels, whilst James is a scientist who dabbles in engineering and design. Or an engineer that dabbles in science. I'm not sure, and perhaps they're the same thing anyway. I believe James is based in Canada. Together they produced a watch called the Exciton, then later came up with an improved model called the Exciton 2. This watch came with and without a date window, in black or blue, and they even produced one with a black DLC case. I'm not even going to tell you which one this is because I think you can work it out for yourself. From a technical point of view, this watch really is very good, but in my opinion they got one thing particularly wrong. But I'm going to come to that later. The watch was made in conjunction with Chronos, a watch manufacturer based in China. Now if you're a watch snob, stop turning up your nose, because the majority of micro brands are made in China and most of them are very good. Make no mistake, this is a micro brand and not a mushroom brand, although that being said, it shouldn't bother you anyway. Unfortunately, my relationship with Chronos came to a sticky end a few years ago when I realised their customer service fell short of perfection, but that's another story. However, in general, I believe the quality of their products are similar to San Martin, of which I rate very highly. And welcome to my unpaid and unsponsored review of the J&G Exciton 2. The watch came in this box. It does the job, but it's got the prestige of a 1970s Skoda. Never mind, I suppose it's the watch that counts. I believe when it was new it came with some tools, but I think the previous owner kept hold of those. Oh, and it's got a 2-year warranty. And this is my watch of the day. It's the Atticus Meteora. So let's have a look at the dimensions, and these have got something to do with the reason I bought this watch. Now the case is 38mm, the lug width is 20mm, the depth is only 10.8mm, and the lug to lug is 44mm. The weight on this very nice bracelet after adjustment to my 17cm wrist is 128 grams. I believe the design of this watch also quite a small wrist, so these dimensions I feel are perfect. That said, I believe a 38mm dive watch is fine for most wrist sizes. In my opinion though, it does wear a little bit larger than those dimensions indicate, possibly about a 39mm. This may be down to the fact that it's got a relatively narrow bezel. Arguably the most important part of any watch is the movement, and this has got a very good one. Generally speaking, when you purchase a watch at this price, you'll get an NH35, possibly a Miyota 8000 series or even a YM55. But this has got a Miyota 9015. Note, you'll also get the same movement if you buy the undated version of this watch, so that means you'll get a ghost position. That however is something that doesn't bother me. It's a very robust calibre that's quite accurate if regulated correctly. It ticks away at 28,800 beats per hour, it hacks and it hand winds, and it's got a power reserve of about 41 hours. It's got a very slim stack, which means it's ideal for manufacturers who want to produce a watch with little depth. Now let's see what this one looks like on the time grapher. And here we are, perfect beat error, a good amplitude despite the fact that the watch isn't fully wound, and it's running at plus 10 seconds a day. That's just about within my personal parameters. The crown is chunky, measures about 6mm. It's signed, It operates the movement without issue. It engages very well, but with this particular movement it will never be buttery smooth. This is because the movement winds when the crown is being screwed in. I'll normally comment on the crown's knurling at this point, but this one's shaped, not to find a better word, and it looks absolutely brilliant. The textured dial with its large indices is tawny and extremely legible. Unusually there is no minute track. There is a date window at 3 o'clock with a chunky frame. Under the 12 o'clock is J&G logo, and above the 6 o'clock in purple script it reads Exciton with 200 metres printed below. You've guessed it, it's got a claim water resistance of 200 metres, which is more than good enough for 99% of water sports. The polished sword hands and indices are filled with BGW9 lume, whilst the tip of the second hand is purple to match the purple script. Apparently there was a lack of lume on the first edition, but believe me, there is no sorted on this one. I charged this before I went to bed and it lasted pretty much all night. Now let's have a look at that lume. Covering the dial is a flat sapphire crystal with a decent amount of AR coating. I remember watching one of Gary's videos when he told us he would have preferred a domed sapphire, but apparently the price disparity is quite significant. Anyway, I'm fine with a flat crystal. The case is fully satin brushed, and what's pleasing is they chose to brush the sides horizontally, as I've never been a fan of the vertical brushing. The finishing is actually very good, and can easily be compared to a watch costing several times more. There is also a brush chamfer, and the watch is beautifully shaped to fit the back of the wrist. Flip it over and you've got a screw down back with some scientific equations engraved on it. I'll get to that later. Fortunately, I decided to have the case back brushed on this version too, as it was polished on the original one. In my opinion, it's always a mistake polishing case backs, as they wear very quickly. The 120 click unidirectional bezel has a brushed ceramic insert, although I think a polished ceramic insert may have been even nicer. And as you may have already seen, it's loomed. The resistance is a little light for my taste, but nonetheless it's very good. There is almost no backplay or bounce, and everything lines up splendidly. I believe that both Gary and James were insistent that the bezel was perfect, as this is one of the hallmarks of a very good dive watch. Now let's have a little listen. The bracelet is the watch's crown of glory. James wanted to design an engineer bracelet that tapered, which is actually quite difficult and most engineer bracelets don't. This took him months, but he pretty much nailed it in the end. The bracelet even came with fitted end links or straight links if the buyer wanted to use it on another watch. It's got very well fitted solid end links, although it doesn't have quick release spring bars. That said, the lugs are drilled, which helps in the removal of the bracelet. It's also got very well engineered screw pins for easy adjustment. Unfortunately, the gap on the link that joins the end link at the top is wider than the rest. I hope you know what I mean. It tapers down from 20mm to 16mm, then back up to 18mm for the clasp. The articulation is absolutely excellent, and the overall design means it catches the light beautifully. Now the underside of the links are actually slightly concave, making this one of the most comfortable bracelets I've ever worn. Other than the clasp not having an on-the-fly adjustment, it's pretty much perfect. It's fully milled, it's signed, it's got 4 micro adjustments, and it's got double pushers. In brief, you may spend many times more on a watch and not get a bracelet and clasp as good as the one on this. Up to now, everything has been 95% good, so let's address the elephant in the room. I believe the branding and marketing of this watch wasn't very good. I think that J&G isn't a great name, although the logo is good. And although I don't want to get hung up on packaging, the plastic box this came in did make the watch look a bit cheap. Chronos make good watches, but telling people they manufactured the Exciton is almost like saying it's an AliExpress watch, but you can't buy it on AliExpress. I realised that the stock sold, but it sold with very little profit, possibly none at all, and the brand hasn't really developed. Look at what Mark at Long Island Watches has done, for example. Anyway, what do I know? I've said it before, open up a German dictionary, find a decent word and go with it. Then put a nice engraving of something nautical on the case back, and you've got a brand that people have spent their hard-earned dosh on. It sounds easy because basically it is. I once remember meeting one of the owners of an outdoor clothing company called Burke House. Burke House in German means mountain hut. I asked the significance behind the name, and he simply replied, "It sounds good," and he's right, it does. The brand, by the way, is British and at the time was based in Newcastle. So basically, other than the branding and the gap on the top of the link of the bracelet, everything else is rather good. The fit and finish is excellent, the set of dimensions is perfect, I like the quirky dial with the fantastic lume and large indices, the movement is always a good choice, but most of all the bracelet is absolutely top notch. Other than that gap, of course. What we have here is a utility style dive watch with the dimensions of something a little bit more dressy. This in turn means that although designed as a sports type watch, you could probably get away with wearing it for more formal occasions. Other than the clasp and the movement, this watch is totally bespoke, and the work that went into designing it must have been something quite considerable. I suspect Gary and James now have given up on the micro brand scene. But it's a shame because they so nearly got this one spot on. In actual fact, I believe they started another project on a dressy type sports watch. I think it may have been called the Academic, but from what I can gather, that's now been put on the back burner. Correct me if I'm wrong. So will I be flipping this? Will it be a keeper? Or am I undecided? Well, ask me in a few months. Does that answer your question? Now that brings me to the end of this review, so if you've enjoyed it, please click on the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, leave your comments below, and enjoy the rest of your day.